Mindset Monday. I am thrilled to be sharing this summer podcast series with you all. This summer, we will be tackling some important and challenging questions. How do you make opportunity from adversity? Strength from weakness? Success from failure? One word: mindset. Our mindsets carry our beliefs about the situations that we find ourselves in, from our greatest struggles to our proudest accomplishments. I am co-host Sachi Badola, a high school student with the hope that we can all have better mindsets. This podcast is aimed to enrich and inform the world on the importance of having a good mindset and its application in various aspects of life. Along with my fellow co-host, psychiatrist Dr. Rohit Chandra, and some excellent guest speakers, I hope to open your mind the way that I am opening mine.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the first episode of Mindset Monday. Today, we will discuss mindset and positive psychology with Dr. Rohit Chandra. So Dr. Rohit Chandra is a child, adolescent, and adult psychiatrist at MGH Chelsea Healthcare Center, where he co-leads the community research program and co-directs a culture and social justice seminar. He is also an instructor of psychiatry at Harvard Medical School. Outside of his professional life, he is the chairman of the board of directors for the South Boston-based arts and healing nonprofit Medicine Wheel, and is a phenomenal actor in the Indian acting troupe SRAVEO, where he and I met. Thank you so much for joining me. It is an honor to have you.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here. And Sachi, as many of you know, is a phenomenal singer and just an absolute all-around star. It is an honor and a joy to be part of her podcast. And a co-host with her.
Great. Great. All right, so to start off, I really want to address what I mean by mindset. So a mindset is an established set of attitudes or mental state that a person has about a certain situation that they find themselves in. So in my opinion, the most important mindset that someone can have is a growth mindset. What exactly is a growth mindset? So growth mindset is a concept developed by Dr. Dweck, a Stanford professor. So as you can see in the image, a growth mindset is when people believe that abilities, intelligence, and talent can be developed rather than something that they only have or can't have, but rather it's something that they can grow into or get from hard work. And also, when you have a growth mindset, other people's successes inspire you rather than you constantly comparing yourself and limiting yourself based on the success of other people. Now, unfortunately, many people have a fixed mindset, which is just the opposite of a growth mindset. With a fixed mindset, you believe that you can only get it right one time, and if you don't have it, you don't have it. You cannot grow. You limit yourself based on what other people are doing right and you aren't doing right. And in that way, you kind of define yourself by your failures and your mistakes. And unfortunately, many people, without even realizing it, have a fixed mindset.
That is fascinating. And I'm very curious, Sachi, as a psychiatrist, I know a lot of psychiatrists have not heard about this concept of mindset and growth mindset. How did you chance upon it? How did you hear about it? I guess I'd ask that.
Yeah, so the first time that I heard growth mindset was after reading Mindset, which is a really fabulous book written by Dr. Dweck. And so I actually run a TED Ed club at my school where students develop TED-style talks and they develop public speaking skills. And I was really stumped on what I should talk about because there were so many directions I wanted to take my talk in. So I was, thinking about it, and then a teacher had recommended that I read this book. And from there, I knew that I wanted to talk about growth mindset because I saw the concept and it just stuck with me the entirety of that year. I was like, I need to implement this into my life.
And after you gave the talk, were you able to? How did giving the talk or how did reading the book kind of change your life? In what ways did you implement growth mindset?
Yeah, so there are many ways that I have implemented a growth mindset into my life, definitely in school, in my learning, in my education. But one really great example of how a growth mindset can actually be useful not just in education and learning is also I'm part of an a cappella group at my school, and we had competed in a competition, and we
Mhm.
didn't end up placing. So we came back and we were so frustrated because we kept telling ourselves, we worked so hard for this. We had long rehearsals. How come we didn't place? And we let our failure define how good of
Mm,
performers and singers we were. But
right.
then I realized I just gave a talk about growth mindset. Why don't we apply it to our situation? So we were resilient. We got back up on our feet, realized that just because we didn't place at this one competition didn't mean we could not grow, become better, and place in another competition. So that's exactly what we did. We worked super hard, looked at the judges' criticisms, were
Mhm.
inspired by the groups that did place. What did they do? How can we improve ourselves? And the next competition came around and we placed. But the best part of having a
Wow.
growth mindset, the best part of having that growth mindset was not the success in the second competition, but the growth from the first competition to the second competition. We got back up on our feet and we actually became better musicians and performers as a result of it. So it was a double win.
That's a fantastic story. I think it highlights the fact that it's a journey, it's a process. It's not just about the
Absolutely.
destination. I'm reminded of there's a book called Happier, I think, by Tal Ben-Shahar. He's a professor at Harvard, and he told the story of training. He's Israeli, and he was training to become, I think, a squash champion, a racquetball champion in Israel. And I think it was an under 16 competition, and he trained and trained, and his goal was to win. And he got the competition, and he won. And he thought there would be some huge psychological payoff to winning. And instead, he just felt kind of empty. And he was like, this is it? Because he had actually enjoyed the training. He'd enjoyed the working towards
The
a goal,
growth.
but he had the growth. But he had, in his mind, assumed that the joy he felt, the enjoyment of growing, was going to be somehow multiplied when he won, and that he was going to reach some fantastic plane of satisfaction, of happiness, and just be in this state of bliss. And that was not the case. And then he said, well, how is it that I thought this, and really what makes people happy? And he started to kind of study that, and then started to teach a psychology course at Harvard eventually on it as he got older. But it's a fascinating point that it really is the journey, and one should enjoy the journey.
Absolutely.
So, and one line I can think of. So Pearl S. Buck, the author, said, growth itself contains the germ of happiness. And I think it's just a wonderful point.
That is wonderful. So true. So, Dr. Rohit, what has your experience been with the growth mindset?
Great question. So I think, just to kind of follow up on the Pearl Buck thing, if we think about plants, right? Plants grow naturally. If you give them the proper proper amount of water, proper amount of sun, the right soil, the right temperature. If they're in the right climate for themselves, if you've given them the right conditions, they will grow, and they will keep on growing, and they will, there'll be shoots, there will be, buds, flowers, fruits, and then they wilt and go back into the ground, and the cycle of rebirth kind of continues after that. And I think in the same way, if we are not growing, if we feel stagnant, it's a very frustrating place to be. And I'm reminded, I guess I would just say that, if you ask someone who's, you call a friend and you say, how are you doing? They're like, oh, same old, nothing has changed. Or they say, yeah,
Right.
same day, same stuff, different day. That's probably not a person who's terribly happy, because they really are not actively growing. In contrast, you call a person and, like you, and you say, Sachi, what's going on? You say, well, I'm doing this podcast, and I have been singing, and I'm studying for the SATs, and, I have stuff going on. I'm seeing my friends. Like, that is an excited person who enjoys, his or her life. And, and that is probably, it's associated with, that person growing. And I think those things are connected. And when you're excited about developing your talents, when you have this growth mindset, you're happy, or at least your life is, meaningful. And you asked about an example. I think about the pandemic, and the pandemic was something that stressed all of us. For me personally, I'm sitting in my office right now, but I'm not seeing patients. Like, I'm not physically seeing patients, and I've not been since mid-March. And that was really hard. I think not seeing my patients, not seeing my colleagues, and I live alone and have no pets, so it was kind of lonely. And I struggled with that. But I think I had to decide kind of who I wanted to be, how I wanted to kind of adjust. And one of the, you mentioned reading this book, kind of, change your mindset. I think for me, the change came when my sister was supposed to get married on May 15th and 16th, or 16th, 17th actually. And the marriage wasn't going to happen in person. And she was, pretty disappointed about it. So I said, well, we really should organize something because she's going to be unhappy this weekend. And so my cousins and I ended up organizing a virtual Sangeet. And so thinking about my sister and her happiness took me out of my own, dissatisfaction with kind of where things were and, how frustrated I was and how unhappy I was. So, so some cousins called and said, well, why don't we do it really well? We don't know if a wedding is going to happen. Why don't we have proper singing, dancing, skits, jokes, things like that. And I said, okay, everyone's busy, but if you can organize it, then let's do that. So that cousin, who's extremely social, organized all this. And I got the cousins together on both sides. And we had 72 people on a 3.5-hour Zoom call that I led or emceed anyway. And I felt so good. My sister felt really good after it. She said, I prepared for this weekend to be really negative and just an unhappy weekend where I thought about all that could have been if it weren't for COVID-19. But instead, she was crying with happiness. And I felt wow. So that taught me a couple of things. One is that, we do have choices in how we behave and how we, our attitude is crucial. So before that, for 2 months, I think I had been rather negative and frustrated. I was talking to my patients and I was, emailing my colleagues and I was, seeing friends and family intermittently, trying to manage the lockdown. But I think after that, it helped me realize, one, we have the choice. We can connect with family anytime we want over the phone, or for those of us who have video conference capabilities, we can do that. So the ability to connect is crucial. And then thinking about others enables us to get out of our own little worlds. What am I going to eat next?
Right.
Who am I going to see? This is frustrating. I have a friend who called me a few weekends in a row, and he said, when do you think the vaccine is going to come out? I was like, I don't really know. I don't think anybody really knows the answer to that. He said, well, I can't wait till a vaccine comes out because then I can take my daughter to this vacation spot that we've always wanted to go to. When do you think that's going to be? I said, I don't really know. And he said, well, here are articles on this. Let's discuss. And I realized that what he was saying was, I can't be happy until this is over. When do you think this is going to be over? And over time, as he kind of kept asking me these questions, I said to him, you seem to think that you cannot enjoy yourself at all until, there's a vaccine. Can't you try to enjoy yourself? Is there a way that you can shift your thinking so that you can find enjoyment in the now? And he said, that's a good point. I said, sure, you can't go to Busch Gardens like you want to with your daughter, but can you do something? What can you do? And it was just an interesting conversation. And he said, you're right. And I sent him there's a really interesting image about COVID-19 that was sort of, who do I want to be during COVID-19? There's sort of the fear zone where you're just thinking about yourself and worrying. There's the learning zone where you kind of give up what you can't control. You really reflect and think about how to act. And then there's sort of the growth zone where you really are thinking of others and trying to help them. And I believe your mother was involved in So We Care, which sewed masks for frontline workers. And that's really quite wonderful. I think of Ram and Surinder, who are great, we're very grateful for co-hosting this podcast or doing the technology for this podcast. And they have been doing interviews. Ram's wife, Pratima, has been interviewing various experts on COVID-19 for the last 3 months or so, every weekend, and doing other interviews. So they've been very pro-social, doing very constructive things to help the community. This is a form of giving, altruism, connecting to others. So the growth zone in this image says, I think of others and see how to help them. I make my talents available to those who need them. I live in the present and focus on the future. I am empathetic with myself and with others. I thank and appreciate others. I keep a happy emotional state and spread hope, obviously as much as you're capable. I look for a way to adapt to new changes, and I practice quietude, which I'm not even sure is a word, patience, relationships, and creativity. And another concept I wanted to share was the serenity prayer, which is, really, it's about understanding what you can control, what you can't, and really sorting between those two things in order to be able to move forward, even if you are frustrated. So the Serenity Prayer is by someone named Reinhold Niebuhr, and he said, "God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference." And I think the loss of control has been very difficult for people. The lives that people led, especially those who have a lot of control over their lives, that control was taken away. You're now locked down.
Instant. Yep.
Finished.
Exactly.
You're done. So you cannot do what you wanted to do. And those who didn't have much control over their lives actually seem to adapt better, because they're like, oh, we're used to pretty much not doing what what we want. But
Right.
those who are in total control and we're like, I'm in charge of this, I'm in charge of that, I do this, I do that. We're like, I can't do those things. And, and people like that, and that somewhat includes me, I had pretty good control, had to figure out how to adapt. And you had to choose your attitude. I have a book called Man's Search for Meaning. Viktor Frankl was a psychiatrist, and he lived through the Holocaust. And he said the greatest of the human freedoms is the freedom to choose one's way, to choose the attitude one is going to live by. He said, in the concentration camps, there were people who gave their daily bread, their daily soup to people who are worse off than them. What better example is there than altruism in the face of absolute horror? That people can choose, like, sure, I'm miserable, I'm hungry, I'm cold, but that person is struggling more, and I can help. So those are some thoughts.
That's really fantastic. Helping other people and giving to the community and building that sense of community the best you can during a time like this, those are, different actions listeners can take to develop more of a positive psychology, because it really makes an impact on your attitude and how you see what situation you are in.
Right. And I'm thinking of, there's something called the resilience prescription, which is going to be on your screen right now. And it has 10 items. And the top two, number one, is a positive attitude. So Dennis Charney, who's the author of this, he's a psychiatrist, and he's at Mount Sinai School of Medicine. I think he might be the dean. He said, the point under positive attitude is that optimism is strongly related to resilience. And if you're optimistic, you can find a way through. Those who have a why, or those who have a reason to live can bear with almost any kind of circumstances. If you have a will, to kind of overcome, you probably will overcome. And the second point, and I'll just go through these two because there are 10 of them and could get a bit dull, but the second is cognitive flexibility through cognitive reappraisal, which is really just looking at your situation and reframing it, basically going from a fixed mindset to a growth mindset.
Exactly.
And the point of that is failure is an essential ingredient for growth. So if you get knocked down, you should try to get back up quickly, and keep moving. And that's what you described doing so beautifully, in terms of your team. So it's really nice.
Absolutely. Yeah, you can really see a connection between how using a growth mindset and positive psychology helps build your resilience. In the face of any challenge, you find an opportunity to grow from failures, mistakes, challenges, obstacles, and that comes from that positive psychology.
Right. So to look at positive psychology as well, so this is a classification of character strengths. Marty Seligman is one of the top psychologists in the country. He's at UPenn, really one of the founders of positive psychology. And he describes, and this is a bit of a complicated diagram, but there's sort of this classification of about 24 character strengths. And, moving towards them, I think, is sort of a goal. These are theoretical, but, I think we all recognize these. And so he categorizes these under wisdom and knowledge, courage, humanity, justice, temperance, and transcendence. And I think just looking at them, you're like, oh, yeah, these are kind of virtues in a way. This is a classification of virtues. I mean, we know about the 7 deadly sins. We know about what's bad, greed, lust, envy, pride. But this is a good classification of what's good and what we can try to move towards. So it's really a beautiful way of describing kind of who we want to be and, what kind of virtues we want to instill in ourselves.
Super. Yeah. I think, having the best part about, having this positive psychology and having a growth mindset is when you have a growth mindset, I have one, and I think to myself that I'm going to keep working on it. I'm going to keep making it better and keep mastering it. However, the best part with the growth mindset, the whole concept is that you're not going to get everything right perfect in the first try. Not everything, like no one knew this pandemic was coming. We have to learn to adapt. You need to figure out how can you, with what you have, make the best of it by being positive. And so I'll keep working on improving my own growth mindset, as everyone should. I'll keep developing the skill.
It's a wonderful point. Arundhati Roy, the Indian author, wrote an article or an essay anyway called "The Pandemic as a Portal," and she had this wonderful line in it. And I run a virtual discussion group on Sundays, and we discuss this article. So she wrote, "Historically, pandemics have forced humans to break with the past and imagine the world anew. This one is no different. It is a portal, a gateway between one world and the next. We can choose to walk through it, dragging the carcasses of our prejudice and hatred, our avarice, greed, our data banks and dead ideas, our dead rivers and smoky skies behind us, or we can walk through lightly with little luggage, ready to imagine another world and ready to fight for it." So this pandemic as portal idea I thought it was just beautiful. And I imagine a tunnel, in a sense. We are stuck in this tunnel. It feels dark, but before the tunnel, our lives before might have been overstressed, too busy, no time for reflection, a little time for self-care. So maybe there were some benefits to being in this tunnel, even if we didn't know, when the light was going to be, when the tunnel would end, and when we would be able to, emerge from it and live our lives somewhat like we had before. So the question we asked in this virtual discussion group was, what pieces of the life you had before would you want to take into the world after? Once the pandemic is over, what pieces of that life, the past in a sense, did you like and would you want to integrate into your life in the future? And what pieces of your life in the tunnel, do you find actually meaningful? What did you learn while sort of in this purgatory, in a sense, that you can say, I would like to continue that. Maybe commuting to work is a giant headache and you would like to work from home 2 days a week. That, Boston traffic is considered the worst in the country.
I know, my mom's a bit.
Yeah, it's just horrible. I mean, the difference between like Boston in rush hour time and Boston when there isn't traffic is the greatest in the country. So maybe traffic is, something that really you want to avoid. Maybe, you figured out a good self-care regimen. Maybe you found a way to connect to others, through this platform Zoom or through, Facebook or through other, technological means, and you want to maintain that. So how do you integrate your life before the pandemic with your life during the pandemic to create kind of an optimal life afterwards? And I think we've all had time to reflect. And hopefully we use this time wisely during, and if we haven't, then maybe we can start doing that. Who do we want to be, and how do we integrate who we were before with who we are now, and emerge even stronger from this? How do we become resilient? How do we use positive psychology towards really just kind of shaping ourselves to be better people and happier people, living more meaningful, richer lives, living in the present, enjoying what we have now?
Absolutely. That is a great point. The pandemic has, even though I'm sure for everyone, it's been very negative, there are opportunities for people to grow and find the positives. Like you just said, there's more time for people for self-care, reflecting on how to make life better once things get back to normal. But how can you make life better now, today, in this time, in the present? So I would like to finish up with a call to action for listeners. What can you all do to develop a positive psychology and a growth mindset? And by no means is this something that, one day you have it, the next day you do not. That's not, it's not going to be an easy or quick fix, but it is something that you will develop and build that resilience to keep getting it. So again, there are many ways that you can implement a positive psychology and growth mindset. Find opportunities for yourself to grow during this pandemic. Help others. Take time out of your own day to help people who may have it worse than you do. I think that Holocaust example you gave was fantastic, really showed that, all those people were living in a horrifying experience, yet they still found some positive way for themselves to help people who had it worse than them, which was great. If you have the ability to sew, make masks for local frontline workers and, people who are healthcare providers, and help and give back to the community. Be part of something bigger than yourself. Take better care of yourself. Reflect for self-improvement of what you can do to make yourself better today, tomorrow, and in the future. And also, this is one thing that I was thinking about. Incorporate some humor into your life, because I find that, incorporating humor can really help bring out that positivity. You find a situation and you can, make it into a laugh or make it something that you can relate with other people. And finally, develop hobbies that you can enjoy. So for example, I've been working on learning some new piano music, and I've been learning some new songs for my YouTube channel. And I think that since we now have so much more time than we did before, this is the perfect opportunity to develop a new skill or a new hobby, maybe gardening.
Perfect. Yep, I fully agree. If you want, when the pandemic is over, you can sit in my chair and you can counsel patients. So you have a wonderful attitude. You have a wonderful mindset. You have such positive.
Thank you so much.
Very impressed by you. So,
thank you so much for coming and speaking with us today. Dr. Rohit Chandra will also be helping me out and hosting some of our other sessions with some guest speakers. But we are so thankful that you all are listening to this podcast today, and be sure to tune in next Monday.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Sachi.
Thank you, everyone.